Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dead Unicorn. My name is Corey. This is the Tabletop Role Playing Game Club, and we are talking about tabletop role playing games with my friend Tarek. There we go.
Yeah,
He's just bummed because he's had a birthday yesterday. That's all.
exactly. Oh, the worst.
So give him some birthday
Birthdays suck.
cheer. Cheer him up just a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
We are doing a rewrite of Legend of the Five Rings. We are not affiliated with anybody who owns it, as Modi, Fantasy Flight, Edge Studios, none of that. But we love this game, and we think it's about time it had a little more refinement to it. Maybe the people who make this game are watching, and they'll add this to their next edition. Who knows? But first, let's talk about the comments from this video last time.
Mm.
So yeah.
Is that going to be something you want to do?
Yeah, let's do that.
Each episode.
Well,
Each episode with
this is a
comments?
community kind of project, and I like to listen to what the community
No,
has.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. That way we can get feedback in every time, kind of address the feedback, and go from there.
I like, yeah,
Like that.
definitely, 100%. So let's go to these comments. Okay, good to see you're making progress of it. I'm excited. Thank you very much. I found Legend of the Five Rings 5e particularly difficult to get started with. Even with my experienced playgroup where we had 10 plus years of experience, 10 plus years of every RPG system on their back, yet no one played L5R before. So we always kind of were waiting for an update or just a better rulebook, as we are still drawn to the world and the story of the game. I wonder if they tried Adventures in Rokugan.
Yeah. Or like Adventures in Rokugan is one way to do it. They're talking about L5R 5e, which technically the version we're talking about is L5R 5e.
A lot of people call it
edition.
5e. I don't like calling it 5e because then people think I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So I call it
If
Fantasy
it's not
Flight.
part of the I agree, because if it's not part of the original AEG material line, then it's not really the 5th edition, because it's not the same.
It's not the same at all.
It's not-
Yeah. It's like
the same,
the
yeah.
Star Wars
It's a completely
role-playing
different
game.
type of system.
The Star Wars role-playing game has the first edition,
And
the second
Yeah.
edition, and then Wizards of the Coast buys it, and then they have their version, which
Saga
is
edition,
the D20 version, and then the Saga
D20,
edition,
and then Saga.
and then
Yeah.
the Fantasy Flight edition. Nobody calls that like 5th edition Star Wars. We all call it the Fantasy Flight version of Star Wars, and I call this the
And
Fantasy.
then there is Star Wars 5th edition, which is a offshoot of the OGL.
Yeah,
Which is
it's-
D20 D&D version of Star Wars. Yeah.
Star Wars 5th edition is actually just based on 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons rules, and that's why they call it
Which
5th.
makes it confusing when you say L5R 5th edition, because then you think Adventures in Rokugan.
Adventures in
because
Rokugan,
that's
right?
D&D 20.
That would
Yeah.
be L5R 5th edition.
Exactly. But so yeah, if you're talking about L5R red edition, let's call it, right, the red canon, or the Fantasy Flight version, it can be difficult to chew on, because it's a completely abstract system that if you haven't played a lot of Fantasy Flight style games, like the Warhammer 40k universe games, those are the ones that instantly come to my mind. Sometimes Star Wars, kind of similar to in Fantasy Flight. It's still going to be kind of difficult to grok, and the rules are so different that like tabletop play for this, like Sasha is another person who came from a completely different background of role-playing game styles, came to L5R, kind of struggled a little bit in the beginning to get her teeth into it, but had to really spend time going over rules, really like 2 or 3 different versions of the game with different characters to really get into the position where she knew what she was doing. Now she's very comfortable in it, but that took a while.
I don't think it's totally abstract, like you said,
at least
but
a
it is
year.
much more abstract than other games. And there,
Yes,
I think
exactly
there's
what I mean.
3 reasons for that. Number one is that you can use any attribute with any skill in your approach,
Hmm.
right? This
Most of the time, yeah.
two, the skills are way more freeform, and there's no investigation skill. So you
Yeah.
have to like kind of think your way through a problem instead of rolling
Yeah, like
investigation.
what is the actual core problem here, and then what attribute and what skill is relevant. Like, am I investigating court documents? Because that might be a design check or a composition check and not an investigation check, right? Like,
The third abstract thing, and of course, opportunities, which are just other good things that happen, and they can be, uh, uh,
tangential to what you're doing.
yeah, they're tangential to what you're doing, but they can also be, what am I trying to say? Like there are examples, but the game master just kind of comes up with things on the fly too.
Yeah, it's a mix of hard rules with like exceptions to those hard rules sometimes. It's like trying to learn English. There is some hard rules that you have to follow in English, but then there's some freeform shit that you can just kind of.
Uh-oh. What did I do? I did a bad.
I freeze, did you freeze? Something froze.
I did a bad.
Are you okay? Did you hear any of the stuff I was saying?
Hold on. Oh, oh dear me. Give me a second.
Oh
Oh
my god.
no.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Hey.
Let me go here. Back to here. Well, we kind of lost our background. Our nice blue
Uh-oh.
backdrop
It's gone.
is gone.
No, the background is gone. Oh no.
No.
Benjamin, I'm sorry. We don't have a background.
Sorry about that. Okay. I was a fool for trying to give myself a little more light, and yeah, I have a rat's nest of cables, and I hit something.
Yeah.
So you were saying about opportunities.
Yeah, like I was saying the rules for L5R Final Fantasy or Final Fantasy Fantasy Flight Edition is it's weird. It's like English, like learning the English language. There's all these hard rules that you have to follow, but then there's exceptions to those rules where they break that hard rule and you don't follow it. Like you can choose any skill in any ring approach you want, except for certain times because those things are already set for you and you can't change off of those. Or if you choose the right ring, then it's easier to do and it's harder to do. Like, so there's all these like weird layers and
Uh-huh.
exceptions to the rules, and then there's also this whole like free form style as well. Like sometimes you can kind of like free form it and just fly by the seat of your pants. You don't need to worry about it. But other times there's like, no, you have to go through the rules and figure out what your shuji does and how it applies to this situation and parse
It can
language.
get really
So
crunchy.
it can get really crunchy really quickly, and most of the time you don't need any of it. Like if you just want to fly by the seat of your pants, you could probably do that easier with the system, but you have to be so fluent in the system to be able to do that in the first place. It took us a while to get the hang of that, and then we still, I think, in our game sessions struggle with it sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think it's over the number of years we've been playing this game, it's becoming easier.
And
That being said, older edition. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I'll before I transition over.
there are cool things in this game that we like and we want to keep, like the ability to like change your approach, and we think these things are cool.
Yeah, we do.
That said, there was a fourth thing that I think is not part of the abstract that also turns a lot of people off, and that is the bespoke dice.
Yeah, special dice.
Special
That's what I
dice.
was gonna say. Older editions. That's exactly where I was gonna go with this next. Is older editions easier dice mapping, where you got just D10s. It's all D10s. It's easy to keep track of what a success is, what a not success is. And then they also have like a more standardized rule book where the rules are much more like uniform and in line. Skills are very clearly described and what they can do and what they can't do, Rings are very clearly defined, what they can and can't do. Techniques are defined, all kata, all this stuff. So if you're struggling with this, but you really like the game, maybe try some of the older editions. Maybe try third edition, fourth edition. Might be easier for you to kind of grok onto, if you, especially if you played other D10 based role playing games. Otherwise, if you want to try giving this a crack, maybe try out some of our home rules here. Maybe watch some of Corey's videos on the main channel where we talk about L5R rules and kind of how to implement them, what they're like in real world scenarios. That might help.
I have the biggest criticism I have on my how to play L5R is that I put in criticisms of the rules in there, and people are like, well, you're turning my players off from playing this. And I'm like, I'm trying to make sure that everybody knows what they're in for. And if you can prepare for that, you can mitigate those problems.
Yeah, you can mitigate those problems and make it a more enjoyable experience for everyone, including the players who might be turned off by that inherently, because you don't want them to be surprised by those criticisms and just blindsided by them in the middle of roleplay, and then they're really going to be like checked out for the game.
So last comment here from the last one. I like that you mentioned the tension between opportunities at the end of the book are optional, and the storyteller wants to give even more options on these things because they can help in case you fail. That tension is not just real, but heightened because they don't fail or succeed at the role. As a storyteller, you want to get... If they don't fail or succeed the role, as a storyteller, you want to give a consolation prize because it failed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, hey, we're trying to move the story forward no matter what. Even if you fail a roll, things still go in a positive direction. It's like,
or at least in a productive direction where the story can continue.
If it's not a forward direction, we're opening up a side road that we can go down, which is how I always do puzzles now in my but in my role-playing games, in all my role-playing games, my puzzles are, you come upon a puzzle, step 1, I just give it to you. Step 2, you can make a roll to get some hints. And if you fail that roll, what I don't tell people is I give them the hint anyways. Which is, I'll be like, oh, you failed. Okay, well, even though you failed, I can still give you this information, which is the exact information I was going to give them anyways because they're stuck.
Yeah. I also like giving side information. So like a lot of what draws me to role-playing games is the same kind of stuff that I experienced early on in video games where I was playing like immersive sims like Thief or like the original Deus Ex game, where you might be able to approach a problem in like a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I hit a situation where my players are like, oh, here's my main, they all have the same idea and they want to go down this one path, but they fail the checks to do that, I might give them a second opportunity, like a secondary path that they might be able to go down. But I'm like, we're basically circling back to the same place I wanted you to get to eventually, but now you're going down a separate road.
So that was the third thing. After they get the hint and they're still not good at the puzzle, a secondary path opens up, or I remind them that there is a secondary path that they saw earlier. Sometimes it's just like, oh, the floor gives way and everybody falls into a pit, and now you're in a different part of the dungeon and you have to kind of climb your way back up, or other things of that nature. It's just like, oh, just because you fail doesn't mean now everything has to stop, which that happens a lot and is one of the more frustrating things
in a game session. To just hit a brick wall is much more frustrating than hitting that brick wall and then it breaking down into a completely different route back to your main plot. Right. Like keeping people on track. It doesn't have, like, if you do this wrong, it can feel like railroading, right? It really can. But if you leave it up as like, oh, this is your illusion of choice, this is like, you have options here, don't forget there's a big wider world out here that you can explore, then it makes it feel a lot more organic, and people will inevitably like want to push back. You disappeared from the thing and then you just pop back in.
I know, everything just stopped again. Yeah, I'm having some problems again. This is a constant thing in these kind of streams.
Yeah, I don't know what it is,
I
but
don't know what it is either. Hopefully I'm back online here. It looks like I am.
yeah.
So Benjamin has been talking to us. Um, Special dice are marketing purposes. Me no likey. Yeah, I have. That's a lot of people saw it that way as a way to milk some extra money out of their fans. That said, I don't. I I didn't see it as a huge imposition. I was just like, you want to sell some extra dice? That's fine. You put a lot of work into these books
Yeah.
and this game.
I
You
mean,
want a
the
little
the
extra money? It's just dice.
the dice came with the core rulebook for me too, didn't they? Didn't they
Uh-uh.
just come with the
It,
core
it came
rulebook?
with the beginner game.
Oh, it's the beginner game. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
the
that's
beginner
where I
game
got
came
it.
with a set of dice, and then there was the main book. But yeah, a lot of people, when you start nickel and diming to get a little more money, people can see that definitely as a like, how dare you, how dare you
Yeah,
come after me for this, extra dice.
for the
Um,
extra cash.
Lastly, oh, I liked fourth edition dice with all the clans represented. The clan dice were fun. I did like
They
those.
were fun. Yeah.
Uh, that said, you didn't need them, but since they were optional, I know tons of people who bought them because they wanted to represent their clan. They were like, we identify with clans, and that is one of the reasons we love Legend of the Five Rings so
Yeah,
much.
strangely intense too, and strangely intense love. There's some people who are really into really specific clans.
Yeah. How
Yeah,
dare you say this about this clan? I'm that clan. No, you're not,
I
dude. Calm
remember.
down.
Do you remember back in the day there was a forum for every clan? There was like
Uh huh.
a website and a forum connected to each clan, and then you could go onto those things. And like the most advanced one for some reason was the Scorpion. They had like this crazy in it like intense weave of like uh websites, and they backed up the AEG fiction archive, and they had like a whole. It was crazy back in the day. The intensity that people had for their clans was big.
So, the last thing is we had a conversation on our Discord about these rules, and especially about the idea of consequence.
Hmm.
Because some people were. So, in the very first episode of this, I brought up the idea of consequence, which is, you know, because opportunity is yes and, but a consequence would be yes but. And what makes Legend of the Five Rings different from standard Genesis games, Genesis is the system that powers most of the Fantasy Flight stuff, like Star Wars. And Legend of the Five Rings is based on it, but has some significant differences. So much so that people consider it a totally separate system. And one of those is there's no um like disadvantage. Like, you can get advantage on your
Disadvantage
dice
state.
and then
Yeah.
like disadvantage on your dice. And there's no
Hmm.
disadvantage here for Legend of the Five Rings. And I find it hard to constantly come up with like good benefits every time. And a cool consequence can also move plots forward in interesting ways.
Yeah. And
So
give people interesting role play opportunities as well.
so I was taking a inspiration from 7C, which says, "Hey, with every roll, there are opportunities and consequences you can get by spending raises on those. So you can mitigate the consequences and get cool things at the same by spending those raises. And here we just have opportunities. So I'm like, hey, I can add a consequence to a roll, and then you can spend opportunity or bonus successes to mitigate uh, to mitigate these consequences. And there were a couple things that people had a problem with. First off is, do NPCs get consequences? And I'm like, what do you mean NPC? Like, First off, you as a game master are telling a story, and those NPCs are totally under your control. You're going to make them do what you want, kind of no matter what, right?
Regardless, yeah.
Yeah. So if they mess up, if they fail, that should be something that is kind of programmed
Part
in.
of the story, yeah.
But people like see NPCs as something that the game master rolls, and I'm trying to take that away too. I'm trying to say everything goes. The NPCs are simply like something like another, just another difficulty to defeat. Another like, yeah. Also, which means that their techniques, right? If they have a cool technique, when they use their technique, that's just a consequence on a defense roll.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of way I was looking at it in my head. And that way, like, bad stuff that happens isn't a game master inflicting things on you. It's something that you can choose to take.
You can choose to take or avoid.
Yeah.
Based on how you roll. I also think, like, the idea that NPCs should face consequences the same as the way PCs face consequences assumes that, like, you're in a competition versus your GM at an equal level. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That makes it that there is a framework there that at its core insists that NPCs are at an equal footing to a PC, right? Which is not the correct way to look at things. PCs are the main drivers of the plot. NPCs are there to make the world feel lived in and vibrant and flavorful, and that allows for the storytelling to progress, not necessarily to just be like a beat stick for PCs to like compete against.
Yeah,
you know
exactly,
I mean?
exactly.
Aren't adding it.
Sasha wants to say something because she was part of this conversation on Discord too.
Sasha has opinions. I guess I'll allow her to talk if she wants.
Allow her.
Saying that if you're going to add consequences outside of what's already in the game, just to PCs, but aren't doing that to NPCs, then that is a straight nerf to PCs, and that's when you have to consider: are you trying to make your PCs less powerful?
But you're
but
you're not. We're not. That's what me and Corey have been talking about. Is that the framework here isn't necessarily that consequences are going to nerf a PC, but they're not going to nerf a PC because everything. If you look at everything as in terms of the way to progress,
revolve around core mechanics of the game, like the strike thing.
But that's not how that works. That's
not how. I see what she's
trying
to say. I see what she's trying to say here is that now we're just shitting on the on PCs and they're becoming less powerful.
Corey, give me 1 second. Because she won't be able to hear you because you're in my headset.
Oh, okay.
How do I do this? Output device, default device. Okay, save. Does that work? Try again.
So this is what I was. So if you think about it, PCs already get what I am considering consequences from NPCs. When an NPC uses a technique, that technique is applied to the PC. This is now being turned into a consequence rather than something that actively attacks a PC.
So instead of an NPC making a check to affect you with a technique, you are now making a check to
negate that consequence of that NPC's technique.
So instead of NPCs being active actors who are constantly independent of the PCs and making checks against them, the PC is the one who is actually driving the initiative by saying, okay, the NPC is trying to use XYZ technique on you. As now you make a check to resist that, and the consequence is you fall victim to the technique.
Yes.
But that's not changing or adding new mechanics to the game. That's just reflavoring an existing mechanic, which wasn't what I was talking about. I was saying when you add new types of consequences that to your PCs that don't exist in the game, like the strife thing you were talking about, 3 strife to all. If you keep 3 strife, you get a spiritual backlash. All all types of characters, any type of check can do that. That is not reflavoring an existing mechanic in the game, because there is no way in which existing characters have that and have to deal with that consequence. It's something new that you're putting in, and you have to keep in mind how that balance changes the balance of the game, because unless you're giving that same like consequence, if you want to call it that, to the NPCs, you are directly saying, I would like to make PCs less powerful. So unless you're, and then you have to keep that in mind when you are balancing, because if you are trying to rebalance with that in mind, that's fine, but you have to actually rebalance. You have to be like, since I'm making PCs less powerful, what am I going to do to give them an edge that replaces that?
But if NPCs aren't
Hold up.
actors in the same sense, if you're changing the framework,
or you can just say, I actually am intending to make PCs less powerful, and if that's your goal, then I mean,
I don't think the point is to make PCs less powerful. The idea is that NPCs aren't making checks in the traditional sense. If you remove their agencies as like actors in the game that are actively making checks against PCs, and make it into PCs are the ones who are handling the checks, period.
I need to give a little context.
There's no reason to put a consequence on the NPC.
I think we're talking about different
things. I need to get a little context here. I need to bring context to this conversation.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about now is I like to shoot out rules ideas on the Discord, and one of my rules ideas I wanted to shoot out was how spiritual backlash works in the game. So as rules as written right now, a spiritual backlash, if you keep 3 strife on your dice during an incantation, a spell, a bad thing happens. The spell goes off because you succeeded at the roll, but another bad thing happens because the spirits are upset because you kept 3 strife symbols. That means you can't cast spells of that element, and maybe like the terrain quality changes, or the spell duplicates onto somebody else, or something like that. And I was like, that's an interesting idea, and I wonder if it would be good to... I'm kind of toying around with the idea of using it for every roll, for like, hey, I am, making a samurai sword here. I kept 3 strife on the making, so but I did succeed at the roll, so I made the samurai sword, but maybe it has like a little imperfection in it or something like that. And I was kind of toying around with this idea. I was just spitballing, and Sasha correctly points out, hey, how do NPCs get spiritual backlash, or get a strife backlash on every roll? Is this nerfing a PC? And does this work within the context, within the balancing of the game? Which are all things I think are legitimate criticisms. And in fact, I said, yeah, I think you're right. I don't think this rule is going to fit unless I really refine it. And I kind of dropped it because I'm kind of swayed by her argument there. And another person
was my argument. There was someone else in the Discord server.
There was another person. There was one other person in the Discord. I don't want to name names though. I don't like to.
Yeah, no, I'm not either. I agree with their point a lot, so I wanted to bring it up because I think it's also valid. And I couldn't hear you for a large part of it, but Tarek was directly disagreeing with me, even though you kind of were like, I've been swayed.
I think
so. I'm mostly talking to him.
I think it's. I still think that my point has like, okay, so the point I'm making is that if you're changing how you think about NPCs in general as only a measure of how to make the plot progress, they like NPCs are inherently like actors in the story that you're telling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if those actors need to fulfill a role in that story, it doesn't matter what checks they make or how things need to happen to drive that story forward.
Right.
Like, just because a PC wants to make a check and dominate some random NPC doesn't necessarily mean that is going to resolve the story entirely, because that would not make for a very interesting and engaging storyline. So if you stop thinking about NPCs as these like antagonistic actors all the time that you have to roll dice against, and in order to roll dice against them, your PC is more powerful because you roll the bigger dice or whatever, that dynamic can be shifted to think of these things in terms of our ideas of opportunities and
But that's
consequences.
not the problem at all. The problem isn't the NPCs
it is.
are
Hold on.
my enemy.
Let me finish my point before you jump in here, because in that scenario, if you're not making NPCs make skill rolls, why would they ever need to take spiritual backlash? If they are not making a skill check, if they are just agents to help drive the story, even in a combat scenario, if they cast a spell at you, regardless, if I want to give them spiritual backlash because I think it'll make that moment more dramatic, I will just say it. They get spiritual backlash, and that spiritual backlash could have consequences against PCs and some of the NPCs.
And I
and the
get
NPCs, because the way that we were talking about it before I put the audio on this thing was that the way we're trying to restructure the game includes a change in how we perceive NPCs and we make NPCs.
Can I say something, please? Because I feel like it's really important.
Sure.
That doesn't matter, because if NPCs aren't making any checks or anything, and that's the structure of your game, that's totally fine, and that completely works. But then instead of it being an option of like, hey, now I have to think about whether or not I should be adding these consequences and roles to my NPCs, you just no longer have that option. It is everything I do now that influences NPC or PC roles, any new rules that I add will be, if it's a positive boon that I add, it will be a direct buff to PCs. If it's a negative boon that I add, it will be a direct nerf to NPCs or to PCs, because it no longer affects NPCs at all. So I completely understand what you're saying. I've understood this whole time, but it doesn't matter, because in the end, you just no longer have anything to compare it to. It's just if you give consequences to PC roles, that is a straight nerf. If you
it's
give
not a straight
benefits
nerf, though. Like looking at this
PCs,
in terms,
it's a straight buff to existing rules for L5R.
But it's not a buff or a nerf. It's a change in how the dynamics of the game works.
I'm very obsessed with game design, and you can call it whatever you want. It's still a buff. It's still a nerf. When talking about game design, if you are influencing the power level of a specific type of character or dynamic or mechanic, it's a buff or it's a nerf, or if it's kind of neutral, it's a balance change. But when you're directly making characters weaker or stronger, like, you can say, well, it's intended to change the game.
Are you
yes,
making
it is,
something? Hold on. Are you making something weaker or stronger if you're giving consequences to actions that are taken in a game, narratively or mechanically?
When you're making the ability to keep dice weaker for all checks, then yes, you are objectively going to make.
Let's break out of this spiritual backlash thing. The spiritual backlash because I feel like you're narrowly focused on that one topic when I think more broadly the idea of consequences and opportunities applied to a role that a character makes. I don't feel like that is nerfing or buffing any characters in the game, because it's a game state that will now affect all players, right? So it's not like you're getting a buff or a nerf to any specific type of character. It is an across the board change that allows for more narrative storytelling through the use of consequences and opportunities on different skill checks.
So you're going to tell me that a character, just for example, I have a really good example because this is currently applicable to the character I'm playing. Sure. You're going to tell me a fire-based samurai that doesn't use magic, that normally has no ability to get spiritual backlash, if this rule was implemented, would not be directly lowered in effectiveness
I said
because of their inability to use their main mechanic for...
Hold on. You're going right back to the spiritual backlash thing. I'm saying get rid of that. Like Corey already said, it's probably not the way that he could implement that. That's probably, you're 100% correct. I'm not arguing based on the spiritual backlash thing. I am talking about the idea of consequences and opportunities based around skill checks. That was the whole conversation that we were having.
But you're being contrary to everything I'm saying. Like, I make balance changes to D&D all the time, and I'm completely aware of how my decisions influence the game. And there's no pretending. When I make a ruling that's going to affect my server of 150 people, I'm completely aware of whether or not my intention is to buff or nerf something specific, or whether it's kind of a neutral balance change that doesn't really affect anything in particular, positively or negatively, and just changes the way the game is played. So you can say it's not a buff or a nerf, but there's a lot of language that we're getting caught up in that we're just not on the same page for, and I think that's causing a lot of problems.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is consequences and opportunities. The idea that if an NPC does an action to a player that inherently applies a consequence to the player's check, right? Like, I am making this harder for you to participate in court, so my NPC is using a technique that makes it so that people don't want to talk to you as well, right?
Sure.
And you're making a check to resist that, and the successes or opportunities that you keep on that roll will determine how that consequence happens to you, or whether you're able to accomplish your job in spite of that.
Let me really refine this example here. So let's say
Sure.
you're trying to talk to a higher up person, but somebody is spreading a nasty rumor about you. And the only way for you now to get in to see that person is to make your courtesy check. If you make your courtesy check, you may have to admit to something that you don't want to admit because this rumor, and it will lose you glory, right? So you have your success, which is getting in to see the person, but it could be a glory loss. So how the check works is that person used their technique to make you lose this glory, but they don't get to roll. The player's rolling. So let's say I say it's a TN2 to go in and see this guy. You make your roll. You have 2 successes, and then you have a bonus success and an opportunity. And you can say, okay, well, there's a consequence that I will lose glory. I can use my bonus success or opportunity to negate that glory loss. I found a way around it. And then I can use, if I use the bonus success, I can say I use the opportunity to also move myself up in the queue to get in to see the person faster.
Soon. Yeah.
This does 2 things for me as a game master, and also as a player. One, it gives more use to things like bonus successes or dangling opportunities that just kind of hang out and do nothing and feels like they're wasted during the game.
Or would require a player to like search through the book to try to optimize their opportunity uses or whatever.
When it comes to taking stuff out of the player has to remember a list and figure out when it's applicable at any given moment, and putting it on the GM to be like, here is a list of things that you can do to modify a roll depending on the situation. That I don't mind. I also don't mind the idea of removing some NPC actions because of the way that L5R is structured. In order to make NPCs able to do anything interesting, you end up making them really, really powerful.
Yes.
Because otherwise they can't use, I want to make an NPC that's good at talking.
And I really want
to do that, I'm going to accidentally also make them able to one-shot.
And I'm trying to solve that problem.
Yeah, so you agree
So
with
I agree with that, and that's what I'm trying to say.
But I also agree with Sasha.
That's why I'm trying to interrupt you and get you to understand that I agree with the core concept.
I also agree with Sasha too that anything we do like this, like adding consequence or talking about these things, is a balance adjustment and can be perceived as a buff or a nerf.
I was specifically referring to one specific instance where that I don't think is a balance adjustment. That I think is a really dumb idea.
Well, yeah, I wasn't trying to argue with you about the spiritual backlash.
No, you could have just said, we're not even doing that. So
no.
At any point.
The whole point that we were making that you didn't hear was this, and you interjected on that. So I was trying to make sure that we circled back to that point.
You decided to argue with me about it.
I wasn't arguing with you about the spiritual backlash. I feel like that's where you were confused, was that you thought I was saying that the spiritual backlash is the thing that was I'm gonna defend this. No, I had no opinion on the spiritual backlash stuff, only on the idea that if you institute consequences, because that was another thing that was brought up, was the idea that consequences nerf PCs and they need to nerf NPCs too. But if you change the idea of how you approach NPCs, then you don't need to nerf NPCs, because NPCs are just there as a narrative tool. Like, every NPC in any game is just a narrative tool. They have no other function besides playing a role in the story to move that story forward. If you have like a niche NPC that you want to inject into every scene, that's probably a more toxic trait
I
for,
think
for a GM.
you're being very disrespectful to my GMPC. I gotta tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Screw your GMPC. I don't want him here. An NPC's point is to move the story forward. So if you disempower an NPC,
not just
what are you really like?
It's not about disempowering an NPC. It's about making sure that things that you are adding that you think would bring cool elements to the game are done with intention and a complete understanding of how it changes certain things that you may have not intended it to change.
I agree, but
That's all.
I don't feel like consequences and opportunities are things that we have not considered.
If you say the word super generically, generally, consequences and opportunities, no, they don't. That's why I was talking about a specific instance. Because without knowing what you're talking about, there's no way of telling if it's a good idea or not.
I had no like.
We don't know exactly how this works, or we won't know exactly how this works. We have like the idea and structure in our minds of how it works. We have the ideas and structures on paper of how this works, but until we sit down and play a game with these rules, we will not know how it works.
Agreed.
That said,
I think.
That said, talking about it, having these conversations is a great way to just, weeding out bad ideas right at the start, or bringing up ideas that may have a good influence on the game. I mean, I really think that while we could say, hey, I'm going to rewrite the rules myself, and it's going to be a singular vision, and this is how we're going to do it. I love that we're talking about this as a community, because for the biggest part, that the ideas I have, I come from like a narrower view with my game in mind as my basis, and other people, they game differently. And they'll have that different perspective of what they value in the game. Right?
Yeah, I agree. And the fact that we can bring those ideas together and try to make an amalgamation that works for as many people as we can is kind of the point, right? We want to make a game that's fun to play for as many people as possible.
What I'm saying is, listen for a bit, Tarek. Don't be so defensive all the time. Listen.
I was listening. I 100% was listening. I was trying to point out that we were having two different conversations. Like the conversation about
you did a very poor job.
The conversation about I kept trying to get you to realize.
I'm sorry, Tarek.
I was talking about spiritual backlash. That had I had no.
Okay, we have wasted too much time talking about what we are talking about, rather than talking about actual the substance of the matter.
I do feel like I should probably be present for future discussions of these, because I definitely have opinions even though I'm sick.
You are welcome to come. I know you've been ill and you've had some respiratory problems.
I've been dying to join these, and Tarek does them right in front of me, and then I start yelling at him because I think his opinions are wrong. So.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that I think all of your opinions are wrong, even though I do just a little bit. Just kidding.
So,
but I do this like all of the time. I probably would say that when it comes to game balancing on a. Okay, you guys have been playing role-playing games way longer than me, so you have a bigger pool of experience to draw from. But I run like a community where I have to think about this stuff constantly, like multiple times a week. So I would say as of currently, I have a lot of real life experience when it comes to this stuff to contribute.
No one's coming after your bona fides, girl.
I am. I feel like I can confidently say that I at least have valuable things to contribute.
No one has ever said anything different.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I a lot of the time I get told, oh well, I've been playing longer. You're a baby. You've been playing for 5 years.
Role-playing games are for boys. Play with
Yeah,
your
you
Barbies.
can't play. You're a girl.
You have too many cooties, so excuse me.
Pretty much.
How do you open?
And I'm also
How
saying
can you
that
even
because
open
their
a
standard
role-playing game
response
book with your
when
boobs
I
in the
mention that
way?
I'm good at something is
That-
you know I've been doing
that
this
is
for like
not
15 years.
that is not
right?
true. That is absolutely
Totally
not true.
true.
Absolutely not true.
All right. Well, Sasha,
Never
we
on
need
my
to move
face.
on from this. So, I mean, I can get you set up with a camera for next time, but right now we got to get to the kind of rules stuff.
The
So,
meat and
go
potatoes.
change your baby diaper, and we'll come back
Yeah.
to you next week. Okay?
My baby diaper.
You were
Yeah.
the one who said that people treat you like you're a baby.
Yeah. He's just trying to riff on this.
I'm just trying to riff off of it. No offense.
All right.
Is she okay?
My silence is because I'm not laughing.
Yeah, I know. Laugh at yourself. Come on. It's okay. Okay. We got a comment. I get what Tarek is saying. I think NPCs would lose their singular voice if they stop making their own social roles. Interesting take. Does an NPC lose their voice if they can no longer make roles?
I don't know that that's the case because they can still have agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a character like an NPC from a game master's perspective necessarily needs to make a role. They need to impose an obstacle
That's right.
in
That's how
order
I feel
to
too.
be effective and
So,
have their voice
If
heard.
an
They
NPC
don't need to necessarily make a role.
if an NPC does something, it's because a game master wants that action to happen. It's the players
Opportunity
yeah,
to make a challenge against that or allow it to happen.
exactly.
Right? It is up to the player to determine whether they see that obstacle as something they need to challenge and get past, or if it's something that they do not care about and they allow it to happen because it's just in the flow of the game. They want to interact with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the player's agency to determine how they interact with those actions, and it's the GM's opportunity or like prerogative to inject these opportunities for the player. Right? These opportunities for engagement. And so if you want your NPC to have a singular voice and to get things done, make the challenges more, necessitate more dice or successes or bonus successes or opportunities in order to affect them. Or have them be able to do things that create more dynamic situations, right? Put them into these dynamic situations together and allow the players to engage with them as it comes.
Just to go back, here's what we have. So we have a document. You can access it if you're a Patreon member, and it's not 100% like it's just a rough draft, and it's just the ideas that we have and we've been writing down. And to just go back through what we were giving to NPCs, we were going to just give them a conflict rank and an intrigue rank. When players interact with NPCs, their TNs is equal to their rank in that category. So if they're doing something physical against them, it's their conflict rank. When it's going against socially, it's their intrigue rank. And then those are modified by demeanor and physicality. So in the game already, there's demeanor, and they change the rings and the TNs of things of those based on those rings for social things. So we just expanded that to also work with physical stuff, with the physicality. Then techniques are just counted as consequences or complications. NPCs can use their role to negate an NPC's tech the same way they would negate a consequence. And then we got a bunch of stuff I'm not totally sold on, like maybe they don't have endurance but take wounds. They keep strife the same way though, and advantages and disadvantages work in reverse against the player. So an advantage makes a player reroll 2 dice, and a disadvantage allows the player to reroll 2 dice when working against them. And that's kind of how how we were trying to, yeah. that was our ideas. We need to come back to NPCs, and we need to flesh them out even more than this and give demonstrations of it. But we need to get back to our conditions. I feel opposed roles by the NPCs are social roles the NPCs do, and intrigue scenes are more granular than imposing a penalty on the PC's role. But that could just be me. I mean, what's the difference than an NPC rolling an opposed roll and saying, I got 2 successes? That's basically just saying that you need a TN2 to win against the NPC.
Yeah, they're just setting a TN, right? And the other thing is, if you look at the intrigue scenes in L5R, what are they based on? Momentum points, right? So if the goal of that intrigue scene is to gain more momentum than your opponent, why not just have the NPC set a momentum as a dice check, right? As like a TN, and then you have to beat that dice check, which inherently boils down all social interactions into dice rolls, which I really dislike. That is like the core rule in L5R Final FFG edition that I hate the most, is that all social interaction is dice. I would much prefer to have dice buttress social situations, but not determine them. Like, we should be able to have a conversation as like characters in a tabletop group, and have it organized so that one person isn't just tearing over everybody and gish galloping the whole situation, which I think is what they're trying to resolve by saying, let's have initiative. Each person has their turn to talk and do their thing and make dice checks. But I feel like there's a more elegant solution to that. And I think taking away NPC turns makes that interaction faster, right? You don't have to sit there and wait to do turns and stuff like that. And it allows you to basically accomplish the same thing of saying, I'm setting a target, like momentum value or TN, however you want to describe it, for the players to compete with, right? Or to engage with, without having to like roll dice or do anything, because I know what my NPC's goals are. I know what they want to do in the end. This is their aim, XYZ. And I can even say they have some secret motives that aren't being completely apparent to the PCs, and give them opportunities to spend their dice or spend their successes to try to suss that information out of the NPCs.
I like that.
Without having to do a lot of dice checks, right? Like, we don't have to have the NPC doing that actively with dice checks granularly, but instead leave it to the players to determine where their mind goes, and then be reactive as GMs or interactive as GMs to kind of allow them to trod that land, right? To make sure that there's stuff there for them to find.
But it is it is a paradigm shift from what we are
100%.
very much used to in most role-playing games. It's a total paradigm shift.
Yeah, this comes from, I think me and Corey are on the same page on this, because it comes heavily from that Cypher system that that we've both played in, which kind of changes the dynamics between GM and player. That would enhance this play style, or like I guess explain this play style. But I think it accomplishes the same thing without having to, like I said, bog down the skill rolls or get into that granularity necessarily, and it lets the players engage with what they want to engage with and not engage with things they don't want to. Right? I feel like it's a little bit more fluid.
That is where we are, and that is what our intentions are, and we hope it'll work. It may not.
Yeah, it may not. And it may not work for everybody, like I said.
Yeah, and it may not work for everybody. Exactly. That's why there's so many different editions of the game. You can pick the one you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to our conditions. Let's do that here.
Stop at disoriented, right?
We stopped at disoriented. We were gonna do dying. Usually we just do an hour of talk, and man, did we talk?
We talked.
We need to do at least a half an hour of work. So I'm gonna extend this a half an hour if you're
okay. Yeah. I can do that.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna do dying, which I'm fine with the rules for dying as a condition, because it says the character is on the verge of death due to blood loss, organ failure, yada yada. Dying character is hovering on the precipice between life and death for a number of rounds specified for the effect applied to the dying condition. Once the allotted time has passed, the character perishes at the end of their next turn. which is why I said that's
Hold on,
weird.
hold on. I lost audio. Give me a second. I may need a refresh. Hold on.
He's gone. It's just you and me, viewers. Just you and me. And let me tell you something. Something that Tarek shouldn't know ever. Ever. Don't tell him what I'm about to say. Oh, he's back. I'm sorry.
Hello? Can you say
Hello,
something?
I can hear you.
Oh, I can't hear you still. What is going on?
I don't know. He can't hear us, so I can give the secret Tarek information that he must never know.
New output.
Actually, don't have anything.
Oh no, if I try to put you on my headphones again, they just disappear.
Your headphones are
Yep.
still there. We can still see them. They don't disappear.
Try again?
Hello, how are you?
Now I got you.
You
All
got
right.
me?
You
Okay.
have to take you off speaker because otherwise I hear you talking and I look forlornly at him.
A dying character is hovering on the precipice between life and death for a number of rounds or narrative time specified by the effect applied by the dying condition. So dying 3 would be dying in 3 rounds. But that's not true because once the allotted time has passed, 3 rounds, the character then perishes at the end of their next turn or after completing
So
one
it's
task
4
in the
rounds,
narrative
yeah.
scene. So 4 rounds.
Yeah.
If the dying condition is removed before then, the character stabilizes and narrowly survives their brush with death. Any character at range 0 to 1 of a dying character may make a TN4 medicine air check as a support action to remove the dying condition. If they fail, they reduce the number of rounds for the dying condition by their shortfall. That's
You can instantly
crazy.
kill somebody who is dying 3 if you try to make a check and fail by 4.
Yes.
Instantly dead.
So there's some weirdness happening in this. First off, after the rounds are done, you die after the next turn.
Yeah.
Which is confusing to everybody.
Yeah.
It should be dying once the allotted time has passed. The character dies.
Yeah. A lot of time meaning the number of the condition. Right?
A GM may allow a death scene stating the character is beyond help now, but give them a narrative farewell. Right?
Yeah, for PCs, I think.
Even for NPCs, I don't mind if it's like a friend that they care about so much, or if it's an
That's
NPC that's like, with my dying breath curse thee, I spit thee hatred.
Yeah, that's
don't
fair.
mind.
I guess so.
Don't mind that at all.
I just feel like the GM should be able to do that with NPCs, regardless.
But I'm like, may should be underlined. Like, how do I underline things? Yeah, there we go. Hotkey that. Also, is a TN4 too hard?
Fair.
Is it fair?
In my mind, TN4 medicine check. First off, TN4 medicine air check is weird. I don't know that air is the one I would think for stabilizing a dying person. I would think like water, because that's all the healing stuff is based around water already. So I would think a medicine water check would be more appropriate, or at least more like thematic. It stays in the themes of each ring. That being said, TN4 medicine check, the reason why it makes sense to have it that high is because of the medical knowledge I know. It can be very difficult to stabilize someone who is at a point when they are dying.
So
that being said, a knowledge of basic like paramedic skill would help you to prolong that period. So I think this should be two phased, right? a smaller check to increase the number to like delay the dying condition, and a higher check to remove it.
Interesting. Interesting. So you can like keep a person alive until actual help comes.
Yeah, if you can do first aid, paramedic tree, then you can keep them alive until you get someone who can actually stabilize the wound fully, by like doing CPR, binding bleeding wounds, that kind of stuff, right? That is your basic first line of defense to try to keep that person alive at a baseline. They may be in critical condition, but you're going to keep them alive and breathing long enough for somebody to intervene. Just because I think it's easier to have 2 stages to this than it is to just say, make it super easy to revive a dying character.
How is TN4 a super easy check?
TN4 isn't a super easy check. Sasha is involved again.
It's not. It's
TN4
super hard.
Is too high. Too high.
Yeah.
If you want to try to stabilize a dying person at a TN4, you're pretty much saying everyone's gonna die.
If you're
like,
a beginning
if
character,
you're gonna make failure is to kill them, then yeah.
But it does. The rule written kills them if you fail that roll.
If you're a beginning character and you get the dying condition,
who's
keeping 4 dice? Who the hell is keeping 4 dice at rank 1?
It means that at rank 1 you have to have so many critical successes in order to win, and that is so unlikely. You're more likely to accidentally kill your friends than save them. So giving a lower level PC the ability to at least maintain their life until they can get somebody to help, like call the Shugenja and I'll hold on to this person for a certain amount of time.
Yeah,
gives them a fighting chance. And then the actual reviving of the person would be a TN, for medicine water.
So a TN, we'll make it a TN 1 Earth, medicine Earth. To add 1 to the dying counter, plus 1 per bonus success. This can be done a number of times equal to their medicine skill. Medicine skill.
Oh, medicine skill. That's perfect.
Something like that.
The other idea is make this a new technique. The paramedic thing, make it a technique.
I don't like that, and I'll tell you why. Then people will be like, well, no, it will be like, why didn't you take this? Why don't you have this technique? Well, now I'm dying because of it. Well, now I'm like, it's really easy to die once you get the dying technique for a very low-ranking character. Allowing them to do that to get that extra help to come, that's the critical thing. So just let everybody be CPR certified.
Yeah, perfect. I like that.
Enraged. So, the character is consumed with rage and fights with a fury as devastating as it is terrifying. An enraged character increases the severity of all critical strikes inflicted upon the character by 2. The first time an enraged character kills another character in the scene, the enraged character gains 1 void point.
Yeah, I kind of love this thing. It is the core to berserking and like stuff like that. I wish there was a way to give yourself enraged. I think any berserker class or like a
berserker can a Matsu berserker has a way to give themselves enraged.
Oh really? They do? They just inherently do? I'm probably just misremembering then.
Let me double check.
Is perfect for that situation. And I know there is a shuji to give other people enraged, which is fanning the flames. You can fanning the flames to get
so here it is.
Enraged.
After you suffer a critical strike or unmask, you may suffer the enraged condition to remove amount of fatigue from yourself equal to your school rank. So just unmask, which you can do at any time. You do not have to be compromised to unmask. You can do it at 0 strife if you want. You can just be like, the only thing is you do it once per, you can only do it once per scene.
You get a void point back. Like
that's awesome.
That's metal.
I love it.
Super metal.
No notes.
Yeah.
All right.
Meditation 3 void check as a support action to remove the enraged condition.
I think that's fine
the condition too. Ends at the end of the scene. Yeah, I think that's fine.
That's fine. Exhausted. The character is physically and mentally exhausted. A character who goes more than 24 hours without sleep or less under trying circumstances at the GM's discretion suffers this condition. An exhausted character does not remove fatigue and strife at the end of scene as normal.
So they don't reset to half.
Yeah. It doesn't reset to half. Though you can like spend opportunity to get rid of it and all of the other stuff.
Yeah.
If you get 6 hours of sleep, you get rid of the condition.
Goes away.
Seems fine to me.
I feel like there should be another condition past exhausted, where if you push your exhaustion too far, you go unconscious or something. Because at this point you can stay exhausted and not sleep for like days, and have no other penalty except for you can't reset your strife and fatigue. I don't know if that's enough. I guess technically at some point your fatigue and strife might go all the way up to your maxes and naturally knock you out. I don't know.
Can we stop 1 second? I got a comment that I think is good for our dying. It says every character is minimally qualified in CPR with quotes. Some character is expert at CPR is different from every character is an expert at CPR. Well, yeah, there are medical techniques. You can increase your medicine skill. Like everybody
to have advanced skill at this
can do the I keep you alive kind of thing. But people who have like shujis that help with medicine checks and things like that and healing, of course those things should exist. Yeah, exactly. Or magical things. Yeah, definitely 100%. That of course will be part of the game.
Yeah.
But also we want to make it fair for starting characters as well for old characters alike, balancing the game, that sort of thing.
It also kind of makes sense given how deadly feudal society is, like that some people would know just how to stabilize a wound.
If you passed Genpuku, you know how to stabilize a wound. It was part of your Genpuku graduation like test. You had to know a little bit about
how to do CPR and how to pack a wound
or whatever they used for CPR back in that day. Like the backwards fantasy feudal way that they
slap the person into consciousness minorly.
Splash water on them. Oh no, they're dying from frostbite. Give them alcohol.
Pack the wound with dirt to make sure they stop bleeding.
Yeah. Fantasy way.
It'll get you far. Yeah, it'll survive you.
And yet it all works because fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
So where were we? Immobilized.
Exhausted. Well, I was saying with exhausted.
Oh yeah.
Is it good enough to just say fatigue and strife? Because at some point after a number of days, your fatigue and strife will just be so high that you naturally pass out. I guess that's the intention, right?
I guess that's probably the intention,
but I feel like the human body should just fail after some period
we could
of time,
say
regardless.
Like after a number, how am I going to do this? A number of days equal to twice the character's Earth, they go into a coma-like state that is not sleep. and 2 days later die. Something like that.
Sure.
I mean, I'm just making stuff up.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough.
it seems fair. I don't know.
Yeah.
It may not be as realistic.
Don't push yourself that far. Let's just say that.
But really, like, you should just go to sleep at that time unless it's some sort of magically induced, there should be blood speaker spells that say, hey, I've cursed you with non-sleeping. It happened to one of my characters in a game once. It was creepy as hell.
You just can't sleep.
Just can't sleep. All right.
Going insane.
Immobilized. The character is entangled, pinned down, or otherwise incapable of movement. An immobilized character cannot perform movement actions or otherwise reposition themselves during their turn. They cannot select a different stance during their turn. At the end of the turn, if the character did not perform a movement action this turn, they remove the immobilized condition. I have some problems with this, but let's hear what you have to say.
I don't mind the effects of immobilized. I have a problem with removed.
Me too.
Because if I immobilize you using some technique or skill, like let's say I pinned you to the ground wrestling style, and you're no longer moving. You can't move, can't take a movement action, and so inherently after that turn is over, you are free from my grapple.
Right.
How does that work?
Oh.
Because you already can't move. You can't take the movement action, and if you didn't take it, which you couldn't already, you're free the next round. That doesn't make any sense.
I have got you with my man catcher thing, but don't worry, next round you'll just be out of it because, yes, I have used a noose trap to bind you up, and now you're bound in this net. But don't worry, next round you just free yourself automatically. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's all bad.
Yeah.
So
that removed when is the worst. It does not have any sense to it. Give me 1 second. I need to let my dog out. You're free. All right.
Immobilized. Removed when. So I think, removed when a TN versus the event that immobilized the character is met. Depending on situation.
Yeah, depending on situation.
See,
I also think the other thing is a character can be immobilized, let's say if they're like, let's say your limbs are bound or removed. Are you immobilized then, and how do you get rid of the immobilized condition at that point, right? Like there's so many different situations where immobilized can be in play that having it as just like removed when you don't move is just so silly to me.
Yeah. So this needs cleanup. But yeah, we're basically changing TN versus the event that immobilize, depending on the situation. For example, a grapple will be against the NPC, but being bound will be against a static TN. See grappling rules, which we'll fill in later or whatever. Right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So let's get to incapacitated. Oh my god. I know we need to change this. But how we change this is vitally important. So let me read it. The character is largely incapable of action due to the scope of harm they have suffered. An incapacitated character cannot perform actions that require checks and cannot defend against damage. After an incapacitated character suffers a critical strike, they suffer the unconscious condition in addition to any other effects. when an incapacitated character removes this condition when their fatigue is reduced to a value lower than their endurance. So you get it when your fatigue goes above the endurance, and get rid of it when it goes below your endurance, or equals. It should be equals your endurance, equal to lower or equal to their endurance. Yes. So my biggest problem with this is basically its name.
Incapacitated.
I think when someone says, when I say, hey, your character is incapacitated, they're like, oh, I guess I can't do anything. I'm unconscious. And unconscious is something different. Basically, this is when your fatigue exceeds your endurance, which means you're tired.
Yeah. It means you're exhausted.
But exhausted has already been used for sleepless.
I know, but it exactly. But that's what it means, is you're exhausted. You're spent. You're
spent.
Gassed.
Ooh, I like that.
Spent or gassed, maybe, like that is what you are.
Change the name. Change the name of this from incapacitated to spent. I love that. I love spent.
Spent. Yeah.
Love it.
You're spent.
Okay. Other than that, I don't have much.
Yeah, I think this is fine.
In the way of, Yep.
If you suffer incapacitated after a critical strike, when you're in that condition, yeah, you can't defend yourself or make checks, but you can do other actions that don't require checks.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to find when we're making rules changes that we're going to be renaming a couple things that just don't make any, like strike. I think we're going to be like changing to combat exchange or something like that.
Yeah. Or just attack. Yeah.
Oh, I don't even like that, because if you succeed in an attack, that means you hit something. And I want people to think that when they succeed at a combat exchange, that an exchange of combat happened instead of I hit the other person.
Yeah, because you're not technically hitting them.
And we're gonna spitball some ideas. If you have an idea of what we can change strike to that doesn't make somebody think that they're actually hitting a person when that roll, when they make that roll, please, I'd love to hear it in the comments.
An attempt? I don't know.
I have
a couple of ideas. I have a couple of ideas, but we can talk about those later.
I'm trying to find a word that basically means two people are in the middle of fighting each other.
Yeah.
And what does that mean when there's two people fighting each other? I was looking up fencing terminology and I saw exchange.
Yeah.
And I was like, that feels...
An exchange is definitely a fencing term.
Yeah.
It can be a HEMA term too. It's a HEMA term too.
But that's basically what I want to convey with that is...
Yeah.
I am attempting some maneuvers. You're attempting some maneuvers. We're parrying.
I think maneuver is a good term, but it's misused here as like a movement term.
It is
instead of a attack term, because a maneuver is kind of what you're doing. You're using different maneuvers.
Maybe a few things need to be changed.
Yeah.
We'll mix them around. My mustache. How do you have mustaches, man? They tickle my nose too much.
They never tickle my nose. They tickle Sasha's nose. That's what my mustache does.
But
my mustache tickles Sasha's nose. I very carefully brush and like put stuff in my mustaches to
I have oil. I have beard oil. Maybe I should use that more often.
That's what I try to do.
This beard may not be sticking around. It's a winter beard, and it may go away in like
I'm about to shave
April.
mine too. It's getting scraggly, so I gotta.
Though I do look, I do cut a handsome. Yeah.
I like having a beard because it frames my chin really well. Right? Gives definition to the depth of my chin.
Okay, let's move on to intoxicated. The character is drunk. Yeah, it's a good description. Intoxicated character. I mean, it should be drunk or under the influence of drugs or anything like that.
Yeah.
An intoxicated character doubles the strife they suffer and doubles all strife they remove. That's fun.
Yeah.
Does that mean if I use drinking as my passion that I remove 6 strife instead of 3?
Yes, it does. And on top of that, it means that you're easy. I like it because it makes you easier to become belligerent, which makes sense because drunk people get belligerent really quickly. And it means that if you're a relaxed drunk, then you're relaxing really hard.
But I can see this.
I also see this as like intoxicated with drugs too. That makes the same
Yeah,
sense.
opium works fine too, and all of
whatever
that stuff.
Intoxicant you're using will give you this kind of feeling. At the end of each scene, an intoxicated character may attempt to sober up. If the character succeeds, they remove the intoxicated condition. A downtime scene spent resting also removes the intoxicated condition. I think that's fine. Fitness 3 water check means that a lower level character is not likely to sober up, which I also think is fine. Like, some people are just lightweights, can't handle their liquor, and it's fun to have those scenes. I'm reminded of that first when we were playing the intro, the Emerald Championship thing, when Matt's character got drunk and brought a what was it, a cactus plant? I forget what plant it was, but brought a plant to one of the people in the thing. Remember, who was carrying the plant? His Togashi monk. Yeah, trying to deliver it to one of the other characters in the I think it was like a Togashi or a Muramoto or something in the beginning of the game. That was really funny. And you don't get scenes like that without having characters be drunk. So
yeah, definitely.
Let's do that.
Yeah. Prone.
I think it's fine.
I think it's fine too. Yeah. Prone. The character is flat on the ground. A character may voluntarily become prone as a movement action. A prone character can move a maximum of 1 range band during their turn. At the GM's discretion, a prone character is harder to spot at a distance or hit with a ranged attack, increasing their relevant TNs by 1. At the end of the turn, a character did not perform a movement action. They may remove the prone condition. I think this is fine, but I think there needs to be like a technique called a kip up, which allows a person to go from prone to standing.
I think there is a technique that allows you to go from prone to standing. I think it's actually a kiho that lets you go from prone to standing, but it should be like a more accessible technique.
Yeah, it should be like a kata, but I could see a ninjutsu doing this kind of
having the same thing. I kind of also think that you can just spend your movement on your turn to stand up from prone. I don't like the idea that if you're prone on your turn, you just have to stay prone. That being said, because like you can voluntarily give yourself the prone condition, right? Like,
yes. But here's the thing: if you go prone and then you shoot somebody, you did not make a movement action on your turn. Because going prone, it doesn't... Oh, as a movement action. So the first turn, you go prone as your movement action, which costs an action to use. The next turn, you fire your thing, and then every turn you're firing, you're not doing a movement action, right?
So you're constantly getting back up.
So you can constantly get back up.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem. I don't see this as a problem at all.
But if... okay. Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's not really a problem. I'd also say you're maybe easier to hit in melee. I'd say that you're harder to hit at a distance, increasing your relevant TN by 1, but also easier to hit in melee because you're laying on the ground.
Yeah.
You have less chance of dodging or maneuvering away from a blow. That's my only real stipulation.
Prone.
Because that's important when you use techniques like that one trip to leg with a spear where you can make somebody prone on your turn. Then if anybody else attacks that person on their turn who are around them, they should be much easier to hit because they're on the ground. They can't really defend themselves as effectively.
So this is how I do this. Instead of... Because I don't want to make it just like a 1 TN bonus to hit somebody. is such a huge bonus in this game.
Yeah, it drops it 50%.
So
right?
what I'd rather
Like
do
it.
is make it harder for you to defend yourself. So defending
Resisting a critical strike.
against damage results in +2 fatigue.
Okay, yeah, adds 2 fatigue to the defending.
Yeah, you basically take 2 extra damage.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could reduce your physical defense by 2, but if you already have a 0, then it does nothing. So yeah, I think that makes more sense.
And that works against melee as well as range. So it's harder to hit you with range, but if it does hit, it's harder to defend against that damage because you're on the ground.
Yeah.
So that works, and this is added text. Okay. Yeah, so that should help balance that out.
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
Okay. Silent. Well, actually, that's it. I think we're done for the day. We've hit.
Yeah, we can continue the last few next time. There's only like 3 more.
There's only 3 more, and then we can get to terrains and kind of go through that. Yeah. Guys.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Thanks everybody who added to the conversation. I love having these conversations with people who love Legend of the Five Rings. Please give us your comments because we will spend an hour parsing them apart.
And incorporating things like, listen, it's not just parsing, it's trying to get better as well. We want to hear your feedback so that we can improve the system. Some people have great feedback. Some people have gripes that they want to make with our interpretations, and that will help us to kind of expand our interpretations and grow as designers and developers. And everybody who gets part of the conversation, look, you're helping to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, right?
Yes. And I also want you to remember, if we seem a little defensive of our things in the moment, trust me, I'll take the entire week mulling over what you said and,
yeah, same.
putting it through its paces, and maybe next week I will come around to it because, we all, what is it? We all have egos.
Oh yeah. We all have egos. We all have different perspectives as well, like you said before. And breaking down those barriers are going to make everybody happier, right? The goal is to make it easier for people to play and enjoy the game.
We're trying to do this every Sunday during the day. And I have a public version of, go over here, copy, and then paste it into the public version. So everybody, if you're part of my Patreon, just $1 gets you access to the document we are writing. So you can see what we've all done in the past.
Did you open up permissions for people who can view to comment? Because that would also be a good thing. Let people.
No.
That way they can't necessarily change the document, but they can put comments in.
Okay, how do I do that? Share.
I think it's in the permissions. Yeah.
Share. Yeah, I got a lot of people who. Oh yeah, they're commenter. Anyone with the link is a commenter.
Perfect. Yeah. Then you can leave your comments too, and on the document itself.
On the document itself. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to just join in and add your perspective, feel free to do that even in place on the document. We can get those incorporated if we need to. Yeah, join us.
Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. And remember, go roll some dice.